We got ourselves a race.
We have a top tier. It is Mitt Romney, Rick Perry, and Michelle Bachmann.
We have a new top tier, and it's Perry, Mitt Romney, and Bachmann.
There's now a top tier in this race, at least for now, of Romney, Perry, and Bachmann.
I mean, I think that's fair to say.
Really fair to say? You're not forgetting, I don't know, anyone, say an ideologically consistent 12-term congressman who came within less than 200 votes of winning the straw poll? Isn't anyone going to give that gentleman a little love?
There's a top tier now of Bachmann and Perry and Romney, and, you know, we haven't mentioned, and we should.
Thank you.
We haven't mentioned, and we should, Rick Santorum, who did really surprisingly well for the amount of money and resources he had.
Rick Santorum? He didn't get half of what Ron Paul got. He lost to the guy who lost so bad he dropped out of the race. Santorum?
We're looking at Mitt Romney, who continues to be the front runner, but we have Rick Perry as well, and now Michelle Bachmann. Let's not count out John Huntsman, though.
What? John Huntsman? Huntsman got 69 votes.
Romney leads New Hampshire, Huntsman third, Perry fourth. Now, do they know how to count? Why would they omit saying who was in second? Well, you know why. Ron Paul.
Is Ron Paul being ignored by the media? 97% of you said yes, he is. 3% said no.
Mr. Paul, why is the media ignoring you to the extent to not mention you at number 2 in the poll? They mentioned number 1 and 3. Why?
I believe personally that I am gaining recognition in the campaign, and it's a threat to a lot of people. It's a threat to the military-industrial complex. It's a threat to the bankers, the big corporations who get all the benefit. It's a threat to the people who preach that we have to be in the world and be in all these countries. So I think it's big banks, big money, big corporations, and the people who want to be the warmongers. If our views, you know, keep growing in popularity as they are, it's a real threat to the establishment. So the establishment is well protected in many of those individuals that control the 5 major networks.
I think if you want to be a serious candidate, I think you got to say serious things, and you can't sound like Ron Paul, who is still on national television talking about a trans-international highway that some secret forces are planning between Mexico and Canada that is a figment of his imagination.
I've met a lot of your supporters online, but I've noticed that a good number of them seem to buy into this conspiracy theory regarding the Council of Foreign Relations and some plan to make a North American union by merging the United States with Canada and Mexico. These supporters of yours seem to think that you also believe in this theory. So my question to you is, do you really believe in all this?
Well, it all depends on what you mean by all of this. The CFR exists, the Trilateral Commission exists, and it's a, quote, conspiracy of ideas. This is an ideological battle. Some people believe in globalism, others of us believe in national sovereignty.
For years now, it's been claimed by many, and there's pretty good evidence that those who are involved in the Trilateral Commission and the Council of Foreign Relations usually ends up in positions of power. And I believe this is true. This is, if you look at the Federal Reserve, if you look at key positions at the World Bank or the IMF, they all come from these groups. And those individuals who help formulate policy in these two groups certainly have a lot to say about our government.
And there is a move on toward a North American Union, just like early on there was a move on for a European Union, and it eventually ended up. So we had NAFTA and moving toward a NAFTA highway. These are real things. It's not somebody made these up. It's not a conspiracy. They don't talk about it, and they might not admit about it, but there's been money spent on it. There was legislation passed in the Texas legislature unanimously to put a hold on it. They're planning on millions of acres taken by eminent domain for an international highway from Mexico to Canada, which is going to make the immigration problem that much worse. So it's not so much a secretive conspiracy. It's a contest between ideologies, whether we believe in our institutions here, our national sovereignty, our Constitution, or are we going to further move in the direction of international government, more UN? You know, this country goes to war under UN resolutions.
We pay 21% of the budget, and on peacekeeping missions we pay over 27%. I think this is essentially wasted money. We also lose our sovereignty when we look to the UN for guidance. The United Nations has tended to take away the responsibilities of this Congress to make these very, very important decisions.
I don't like big government in Washington, so I don't like this trend toward international government. We have a WTO that wants to control our drug industry, our nutritional products.
Now it's not us who will vote, but it will be the non-elected officials who will fight the battles in an unelected international bureaucracy, the WTO, which acts in secrecy. There's something wrong with that.
So I'm against all that, but it's not so much as a sinister conspiracy, it's just knowledge is out there. If we look for it, you'll realize that our national sovereignty is under threat.
Congressman Paul, thank you.
Today we occupy 2 countries in the Middle East. We have suffered over 20,000 casualties and caused possibly 100,000 civilian casualties in Iraq. We have spent over $200 billion in these occupations, as well as hundreds of billions of dollars here at home, hoping to be safer. Our government is now permitted to monitor the internet, read our mail, search us without proper search warrants, to develop a national ID card, and to investigate what people are reading in libraries. The creation of the Transportation Security Administration has intruded on the privacy of all airline travelers, and there is little evidence that we are safer for it. Patting down old women and little kids in airports cannot possibly make us safer. It serves only to make us more obedient and complacent toward government intrusion in our lives.
Here, 2 weeks ago, they passed this very, very ornery National Defense Authorization Act. But that bill essentially says that any American citizen now can be arrested. Not by their local police, not by the FBI, not by some other group, but by the military. This is military law. The military can come in and arrest an American citizen and put in prison indefinitely and denied a lawyer. And I have come to the firm conviction that we as Americans should never give up any liberty on the pretense that we're going to have more security.
So now what the FDA is doing, they will arrest you if you start drinking raw milk and you happen to cross a state border. What is so dangerous about you making your own choice about whether or not you can drink raw milk?
The FDA and the drug companies are in bed together, and they squeeze out competitions and build up their monopolies, and they love government medicine because they make more money. The insurance companies and the drug companies, whether it's Democrats or Republicans reforming the medical care system, these corporations run the show. And what does the FDA do when it comes to alternative or natural products? The FDA and the drug industry keeps them off the market. A natural drug product, alternative health care, freedom of choice, it is obstructed from those making those free choices. So it's there to protect the drug industry. And I don't like to see government protecting big industries and big corporations.
And now they're planning more. They're planning the whole idea of controlling the internet. They're saying they're going to control piracy on the internet. But what they're going to do is control your freedom and your privacy.
Wikileaks' release of classified information has generated a lot of attention worldwide in the past few weeks. It has been charged by self-proclaimed experts that Julian Assange, the internet publisher of this information, has committed a heinous crime deserving prosecution for treason and execution or even assassination, which has resulted in the greatest number of deaths. Lying us into war, or WikiLeaks revelations, or the release of the Pentagon Papers. Was it not once considered patriotic to stand up to our government when it's wrong?
we are not going to be safer just because we have more torture and think that we're going to get more information. I mean, when you capture 100 people and one may be a terrorist and you start torturing all of them, why would we torture and why would we take that risk and why would we build up more enemies in this manner?
Let's talk about what could be the most explosive issue of this campaign if the mass media would get a hold of it and do something about it, but they're covering it up. The government involvement in drugs. Oliver North and his people involved with the Contras have been running drug operations, cocaine primarily, bringing it back into the United States. But neither the Democrats aren't talking about this. Now, are the Libertarians talking about this?
I think George Bush, through his office and through the fact that he was a member of this, head of the CIA, I think he was very, very close to it. He knows exactly what was happening. Unfortunately, I wish that we could get this information out, and I continue to talk about it, but I sadly believe that there will be very little said.
There's been fairly strong evidence that the CIA has been involved in drug dealing. There are times when I think the war in Afghanistan, we say it has to do with pipes and oil. The other commercial thing may be the drug trade. Maybe the CIA's in competition with the drug dealers over there because there's a lot of self-financing in these organizations. The Congress has a responsibility to find out what they're doing, and if they're not doing it, fine and dandy, we'll clear the air. We need to have a different system of collecting intelligence because they can tell us anything. Remember how we went to war in Iraq? The CIA was very much involved. Up there and say the CIA, they have weapons of mass destruction. They're about to attack us. And it was based on false information. And this is what disturbs me the most, and that's why I want much more transparency of what our government is doing. It fits together, the secrecy of the CIA as well as the secrecy of the Fed. They control the money and they control secret government.
Bernanke and every other Fed chief operates in secrecy. He controls the supply of money, which is the dollar, which is the reserve currency of the world. He can create $1 trillion in secret without any monitoring of the Congress. Well, where did you get the money? You created this money, so you did monetize debt. That went into the banking system. The banking system can buy treasury bills, and they can borrow money at 0%, and that's why they're making a lot of money right now, because they can buy other debt and make a little bit more, and it looks magic except for the mortgage holder, or the people who are losing their mortgages and losing their houses right now. So this whole idea that capital can come from a printing press rather than savings, I still have a terrible time trying to understand how an economy can thrive on that, because it rejects every notion of free market capitalism. So that's $105 billion we're going to commit to bailing out the various countries of the world. Who pays for this? Where does it come from? Will this all come out of the printing press once again, and we are expected to bail out the world?
It's the G20 leadership apparently has agreed that this is a way to provide credit to avoid fiscal or exchange rate crises in countries around the world.
Again, where will the money come from? This is our problem in this country. We're bankrupt too. Where would the money come from?
It would come. It's a loan, but it would come from the U.S.
Eventually,
government.
we would create out of thin air.
Well, it's a loan.
Because we don't have any
money. If it's not paid back, then we would take our share of the loss.
But there is no authority in the Constitution that grants this right to have a central bank and to create money out of thin air, even though Wall Street once again is making money, the banks are making money, they're repaying the bills. But it's all because of a collusion between the Federal Reserve System, the banks, and the large corporations, while the people are still unemployed. It is the Federal Reserve and the monetary system that encourages runaway deficits, runaway spending, runaway militarism, and runaway welfareism. Federal Reserve is responsible for the inflation, the business cycle, the unemployment. We have a bond bubble going on right now, and it's the result of Federal Reserve policy, but they don't want you to think and talk about that.
Congressman Paul, this comes from Jay Majumdar from Roswell, Georgia, and he wants to know if you agree with Senator McCain's statement that the United States might need to have U.S. troops in Iraq for as long as even 100 years.
I don't even think they should have gone. So keeping them for 100 years, where's the money going to come from? How many men are you willing to let die for this? For something that has nothing to do with our national security. There were no Al-Qaeda there, had nothing to do with 9/11, and there was no threat to our national security. They never committed aggression. It's unconstitutional. It's an undeclared war. And we have these silly arguments going on about who said what when. These are technicalities. We should be debating foreign policy, whether we should have interventionism or non-interventionism, whether we should be defending this country or whether we should be the policemen of the world, whether we should be, running our empire or not. We're always dealing with the symptoms and the disease and never saying, how did this come about?
Yes, it's a serious matter what's happening in Iran, but we don't have any right to spend tens of millions of dollars in a program with our CIA to have an overthrow of their government. If we put on stronger sanctions against the Iranians, that is an act of war. If somebody came and put sanctions on us and prevented our imports, we would consider that an act of war. At the same time, we move closer to a much greater conflict in the region. That's what I worry about. I think there's a natural tendency, especially for men and male leaders, to be macho, and their country and their citizens don't like you to be wimpish. They don't want you to be weak, and they want you to stand strong. And then when a woman gets in charge, she wants to prove she's manly enough. I'm convinced that taking a position that I have takes every bit as much conviction and belief as somebody who thinks that the solution is always violence.
Since the bully pulpit and the media propaganda machine are instrumental in government cover-ups and deception, the final truth emerges slowly and only after much suffering. The arrogance of some politicians, regulators, and diplomats actually causes them to become even more aggressive and more determined to prove themselves right, to prove their power is not to be messed with by never admitting a mistake. Truly, power corrupts.
Even if Ron Paul won every primary from South Carolina tomorrow to the New Jersey and California primaries in June, he wouldn't be embraced by the establishment because change scares people in power. They cannot imagine their lives without the power. What's so dangerous about him? He wants a return to the Constitution. And though the Constitution is our founding document and embodies our first principles of limited government, sound money, and personal freedom, we've drifted so far from it that a return to those principles would indeed mean substantive change to the government. It's a sad state of affairs that a simple return to first principles represents fundamental change. We've drifted so far, drowned so deep in debt, lost so many of our rights, fought so many fruitless wars, that if we don't rock the boat now, we may end up sinking with it.